I didn't realize I was suffocating until I caught myself holding my breath in a room where nothing was technically wrong. That's the scary part, I think. From the outside, my life looked fine. Good, even. Stable job. Supportive family. Friends who describe me as reliable and solid, which are apparently compliments when you're pushing 30. I played the role everyone expected so well that eventually I forgot it was a role at all. Or maybe I just convinced myself it wasn't. I was the good son, the easy one, the one who didn't cause problems or ask uncomfortable questions. I learned early how to read a room, how to adjust my tone, my posture, my opinions depending on who was watching. I didn't do it consciously anymore. It was muscle memory, survival instinct dressed up as maturity. At family dinners, I laughed at the right jokes. I let my mom talk about grandchildren in the vague, hypothetical way that kept things safe. I nodded when my dad talked about finding the right girl eventually, like it was a future errand I just hadn't gotten around to yet. No one pushed too hard. I gave them just enough truth to keep suspicion low. Work was the same. I worked in project management ironic, considering my entire personality felt like one long-term project designed to meet everyone else's expectations. I was good at it. Calm under pressure. Diplomatic. The guy people trusted to keep things moving without rocking the boat. And I was exhausted. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes. The deeper kind. The kind that settles in your chest and makes everything feel slightly heavier than it should. Like you're walking around with an invisible weight strapped to your ribs. The crack started small. It always does. It was a Tuesday late afternoon, the office mostly quiet. I was staring at my screen, pretending to read an email for the third time, when my reflection caught in the dark glass. Jaw tight, shoulders raised, breath shallow. I looked like someone bracing for impact, even though nothing was happening. I remember thinking very clearly, if this is what fine feels like, I don't think I can do it forever. That thought scared me more than any worst-case scenario I'd ever imagined. I started noticing the little things after that. How I avoided mirrors too long. How I felt weirdly resentful watching couples on the train, not because I wanted what they had exactly, but because they looked unguarded, like they weren't constantly editing themselves mid-thought. I told myself I just needed a break, a reset, something small and manageable. So when my coworker mentioned a friend's birthday get-together that weekend low-key, mostly people I didn't know, I said yes before I could overthink it. That's where Nathan came in. I noticed him immediately, which annoyed me. Tall, without being imposing. Relaxed in his own body in a way I wasn't. He had this laugh that didn't ask permission before it existed loud, real, unapologetic. He wore a faded black t-shirt and jeans like he hadn't stood in front of a mirror negotiating with himself for 20 minutes beforehand. We didn't talk at first. We just kept ending up in the same spaces. The kitchen, the balcony, standing too close without acknowledging it. When he finally asked me something simple where I knew the host for felt my brain short circuit, like I'd been caught doing something illegal. Work, I said too quickly. Ah, he smiled. That explains the haunted look. I laughed, surprised by how easy it came out. We talk about nothing important. Music, bad movies, how everyone pretends to love hiking more than they actually do. But underneath it, something was shifting. Not attraction exactly, though, that was there, but recognition. Like he was seeing the parts of me I usually kept folded away and not asking me to explain them. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You ever feel like you're living slightly to the left of your own life?" The question hit so hard, I had to look away. "Yeah," I said quietly. "All the time." He didn't push, just nodded like that answer made sense. I went home that night with a strange pressure behind my eyes. Not sadness, not happiness, something else. Like a door I didn't remember locking had shifted on its hinges. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized the crack wasn't the problem. It was the first honest breath I'd taken in years. And once you feel that even briefly, it's hard to pretend you don't need air. The week after that party felt unreal, like I'd stepped half a pace out of alignment with my own routine. Nothing actually changed. Same alarm, same commute, same polite conversations where I answered questions with safe, pre-approved versions of myself. But now there was a quiet awareness underneath everything, like a low hum I couldn't shut off. I kept replaying Nathan's question in my head, not the words themselves, but the way he'd asked them. No judgment, no curiosity for sport, just recognition. I didn't see him again right away. Part of me was relieved. Another part felt oddly disappointed, which annoyed me more than anything. I told myself it was nothing, just a moment. People have moments all the time. They don't all mean something. Still, I caught myself checking my phone more than usual. We ran into each other a week later, accidentally on purpose. Same coffee shop in my office. I noticed him because he stood out without trying, leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone like he wasn't aware of the space he occupied. When he looked up and saw me, his face shifted surprise, then a small, pleased smile. "Hey," he said like it mattered. "Hey," I replied, and felt my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety. We grabbed coffee together and sat outside, knees almost touching. The conversation picked up where it left off, easy and unforced. He asked about my job. I actually listened to the answer. I found myself saying things I usually edited out: how tired I was, how I felt like I was constantly bracing for expectations I couldn't quite see. "You're allowed to disappoint people, you know?" he said gently, like he wasn't offering advice so much as permission. I laughed, but it came out thin. "That sounds fake." "Yeah," he admitted. "I'm still practicing it." After that, we started seeing each other more. Not dates, at least, not officially. Walks after work. Late night texts about nothing important. Sitting on opposite ends of his couch, watching something neither of us cared about. Our shoulders slowly drifting closer until they touched. Every time, I waited for the panic, for the internal alarms to start screaming. They didn't. Instead, there was this quiet steadiness, like my body recognized something my brain was still arguing with. One night, he asked me why I'd never mentioned dating anyone seriously. The question was casual, but my throat tightened instantly. Old reflexes kicked in, ready with deflections and half-truths. "I just haven't prioritized it," I said. He studied me for a second, then nodded. "Okay." That was it. No follow-up. No pressure. And somehow, that made it harder to keep lying. The realization came later, alone, brushing my teeth in my bathroom mirror. Same reflection as always, same face, same eyes, but something in my expression had changed. I didn't look trapped. I looked undecided, like someone standing at the edge of a choice they've been avoiding for years. I leaned on the sink and let the truth surface quietly, without ceremony. I wasn't afraid of being gay. I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped being what everyone needed me to be. The role had given me safety, approval, a script, but it was tightening around me now, every expectation another hand at my throat. And Nathan, without trying, without asking, had shown me what it felt like to breathe without permission. I didn't know what I was going to do with that yet, but I knew I couldn't unknow it. And that felt like the beginning of something I wasn't sure how to survive, but also wasn't sure I wanted to escape. The tension didn't explode. It seeped. That was the strange part. There was no dramatic confession, no late-night breakdown where everything spilled at once. Instead, it threaded itself through my days, quietly, changing the weight of things. Every interaction felt slightly more loaded. Every silence said more than it used to. I started noticing how often I edited myself around Nathan and how unnecessary it felt. When I hesitated, he waited. When I spoke carefully, he didn't rush me. That alone was disarming. I wasn't used to someone leaving space without trying to fill it. One evening, we walked along the river near his place. The city was loud behind us, but the path itself was calm, the water dark and slow-moving. We talked about childhoods. He told me about growing up with a dad who believed feelings were something you handled privately. I told him about being praised for being easy, and how that word followed me everywhere like a warning label. "Easy kids don't get asked how they're doing," he said. I stopped walking. He noticed immediately. Turned toward me. "No impatience, no cuernis." Just attention. "Yeah," I said. "Exactly." We stood there for a moment, the air cool, the river moving beside us. His hand brushed mine, not intentional enough to be bold, not accidental enough to ignore. I felt it all the way up my arm, my body reacting before my thoughts caught up. I didn't pull away. After that, things felt more fragile. Not in a bad way, just exposed. Like touching something valuable without knowing where to put it yet. I found myself pulling back slightly, instinctively, the old fear creeping in. What if this changed things too much? What if I couldn't go back to the version of myself everyone recognized? Nathan noticed. Of course he did. You okay? He asked one night, sitting across from me on his couch, elbows on his knees. I nodded automatically, then stopped myself. I don't know, I admitted. The words tasted unfamiliar but honest. I feel like I'm standing in the doorway of my own life, and I don't know which side I'm allowed to be on. He leaned back, considering that. I don't think anyone's allowed, he said finally. I think you just choose and then deal with the fallout. That scared me, but it also felt real. The shift happened quietly, the way all important things seem to. We were sitting side by side, shoulders touching, the room dim, no TV on this time. I could feel his presence beside me, solid, patient. I realized I wasn't holding my breath. I'm tired, I said suddenly. Not physically. He understood anyway. He nodded once. Yeah, me too. There was no kiss. No declaration. Just his hand finding mine this time, deliberate but gentle, fingers fitting like they'd been waiting. My chest tightened, but not from panic. From relief. I knew then that the role I'd been playing wasn't going to disappear overnight. Expectations don't loosen their grip that easily. But for the first time, I wasn't facing the crack alone. And as I sat there, hand in hand with someone who didn't need me to be easy or correct or quiet, I felt something settle inside me. Not certainty, but readiness. And that, I realized, was enough to keep going. I thought holding Nathan's hand would be the hard part. It wasn't. The hard part was what came after walking back into my regular life with that warmth still lingering in my fingers, like evidence I couldn't erase. I started noticing how much effort it took to shrink myself again. How loud the internal voice was that kept saying, "Careful dash, not yet dash, don't ruin this dash." Because that was the real fear, wasn't it? Not losing him, but losing the version of me that everyone else was comfortable with. The first real test came at Sunday dinner. Same table, same roast chicken, same rhythm of conversation I could navigate blindfolded. I sat there listening to my parents talk about neighbors, about work, about nothing that mattered, and felt oddly detached. Like I was observing a scene I'd performed in too many times already. My mom asked if I was seeing anyone. Casual, curious, no trap intended. I opened my mouth, ready with the usual answer, and stopped. The silence stretched. Not long, just long enough to feel it. I'm not really, I said finally. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Still, my heart was pounding like I'd just jumped a fence. Plenty of time, my dad said easily, and moved on. No collapse. No confrontation. The world didn't end. But something inside me shifted. The lie didn't sit right anymore. It felt heavier than the truth would have. Later that night, I told Nathan about it. We were sitting on his bed, backs against the wall, shoes kicked off, the room quiet except for distant city noise. I almost said it, I admitted, and then I didn't. He didn't react the way I feared. No disappointment. No pressure. Just a slow nod. Almost counts, he said. It means you're listening to yourself. I don't know when I'll be ready, I said. The vulnerability in my voice surprised me. That's okay, he replied. I'm not dating your readiness. I'm dating you. That sentence landed somewhere deep, steadying me. For the first time, I felt like there was room to move at my own pace without being left behind. He reached for me, then not urgent, not demanding. Just his forehead resting against mine. We stayed like that for a while, breathing the same air. When he kissed me, it was slow and careful, like he was checking in with every part of me. I didn't pull away. Later, lying beside him, staring at the ceiling, I felt something unfamiliar but welcome settle in my chest. Not certainty, not bravery, permission. I knew there would be harder conversations ahead. With my family, with friends, with myself. The role I'd been playing my whole life wasn't going to loosen its grip without a fight. But now I had a reference point, a version of myself that felt honest, even if it was still quiet. As I drifted towards sleep, Nathan's hand warm against my side, I realized the pressure hadn't disappeared. But it wasn't crushing me anymore. It was changing shape. And for the first time, I trusted myself enough to believe I could change with it. The truth doesn't announce itself all at once. It waits. I learned that in the weeks that followed. Life didn't slow down to accommodate my internal shift. Work deadlines piled up. Family group chats buzzed. Friends invited me out like nothing fundamental had changed. And on the surface, nothing had. I still showed up, still smiled, still played my part. But the role didn't fit the same way anymore. The first time I felt it tighten again was at a friend's birthday dinner. Loud restaurant. Too many voices overlapping. Someone's arm slung around their girlfriend's shoulders across the table. Someone else joking about dating apps and keeping options open. Normal conversation. Harmless. And yet, my chest started to compress, that old familiar pressure creeping back in. I caught myself scanning the table, calculating responses, adjusting my posture until Nathan, sitting beside me, leaned in slightly and murmured, "You don't have to perform." It was so quiet no one else heard, but it hit me like a hand on my back, steadying me. I nodded once, barely. For the rest of the night, I spoke less. Not withdrawn, just honest about what I didn't feel like contributing. No one called me out. No one seemed offended. The realization landed slowly. I've been doing so much extra work for people who weren't actually demanding it. The bigger moment came later, alone with my sister. We were walking through the neighborhood we grew up in, the air cool, streetlights flickering on. She talked about her job, her frustrations, the way adulthood felt heavier than she'd been promised. I listened, then surprised myself by saying, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's version of you?" She stopped walking, turned to me. "Yeah," she said immediately. "All the time." "Why?" My heart started racing, but I didn't shut down this time. I didn't sprint away from the edge. "I think I've been," I said carefully, "and I'm trying not to anymore." She studied my face for a long second, then nodded, not confused, not alarmed. "Just present." "Good," she said. "You were getting kind of distant." That was it. No interrogation, no fear, just concern. I walked home afterward feeling lighter and heavier at the same time, like I'd taken off armor without knowing what the weather would be like. That night, lying next to Nathan, I told him everything. The dinner, my sister, the way the pressure flared and receded instead of swallowing me whole. "You're doing it," he said quietly. "Doing what?" "Living closer to the center of yourself." I thought about that for a while. About how the crack that once terrified me had become a seam, something opening instead of breaking. I wasn't free. Not yet. But I wasn't trapped either. As I drifted towards sleep, his arm loose around me, I realized something important. The role I'd been playing hadn't only been about pleasing others. It had been about protecting myself. And now, slowly, carefully, I was learning a different kind of safety, one that didn't require me to disappear. That realization settled gently, like a breath finally released. And I slept. I didn't come out in some dramatic, world-stopping way. There was no announcement, no speech, no single moment where everything cracked open and spilled out cleanly. Instead, it happened the way my life had started changing in the first place, quietly, unevenly, in pieces. And somehow, that felt right. The first time I said it out loud to someone who wasn't Nathan, my voice barely recognized itself. It was my sister again. We were sitting on the floor of her apartment, backs against the couch, half watching a show neither of us was invested in. She was scrolling on her phone when she said, casually, "So, you seeing anyone lately?" The question hovered. Familiar. Loaded. I stared at the TV, felt my heartbeat pick up, felt that old instinct rise, deflect, redirect, smooth it over dash. Instead, I swallowed. "Yeah," I said. She looked up, immediately attentive. "Oh, it's a guy," I added. My chest tightened, but I didn't stop. "His name's Nathan." She didn't react right away, just watched me, like she was checking something important in my face. Then she smiled. Not big, not shocked, just real. "Okay," she said. "You look calmer when you talk about him." That was it. No questions about labels. No timeline. No concern disguised as curiosity. Just acceptance, so ordinary it almost knocked the wind out of me. I went home that night feeling like I'd crossed a bridge without realizing how far I'd been standing from the other side. Telling my parents was harder. Not because I thought they'd reject me outright, but because I was tired of managing their reactions before they even had them. I waited too long. Put it off until it started showing up in my body again: tight shoulders, shallow breathing, the familiar weight pressing inward. Nathan never pushed. He just stayed close, steady, reminding me that whatever happened, I wouldn't be doing alone. The conversation itself was messy, awkward pauses, my mom's eyes going glassy, my dad asking questions that landed wrong, but came from confusion, not cruelty. I didn't say everything perfectly. They didn't respond perfectly either. But I didn't shrink. I stayed in my chair. I breathed. I corrected them gently when they missed the mark. I left when I felt myself starting to fold inward again. That mattered more than their immediate understanding. Weeks later, sitting on Nathan's balcony, city lights stretched out below us, I realized something surprising. The pressure hadn't vanished, but it wasn't centered on my chest anymore. It lived further out now at the edges of conversations, in moments of uncertainty, in the space between who I'd been and who I was becoming. It no longer felt like chokehold. It felt like resistance, like gravity, manageable. I leaned back in my chair, Nathan's knee pressed against mine, and let myself rest there. Not performing, not bracing, just existing. For most of my life, I'd mistaken endurance for strength. Thought that surviving quietly was the same as living well. I know better now. I didn't escape the role all at once. I loosened it, tete be tete, breath by breath. And sitting there, not fully free but fully present, I understood something simple and solid. The life I was building didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be mine. I used to think freedom would feel loud, like relief crashing through me all at once. Like a door kicked open, sunlight flooding in, everything suddenly clear and easy. That fantasy had kept me waiting for years for the right moment, the right version of myself, the point where fear magically loosened its grip. That moment never came. What came instead was quieter and harder to explain. It happened on an ordinary morning. No milestone attached to it. I was brushing my teeth, running late, half awake, when I caught my reflection again. Same bathroom, same mirror, but my shoulders weren't hunched this time. My jaw wasn't clenched. I looked like someone inhabiting his body instead of bracing against it. I stood there longer than necessary, toothbrush hanging uselessly from my mouth, and felt something click into place. This was what breathing felt like. Not happiness, not certainty, just space. I still disappointed people. My parents still said the wrong things sometimes. Friends asked questions that landed awkwardly. There were days I woke up afraid, days the old instincts tried to drag me back into smaller shapes. But now, when that pressure showed up, it didn't convince me I was doing something wrong. It reminded me I was doing something different. Nathan and I didn't become some perfect, symbolic couple. We argued about dumb things. We navigated boundaries. We learned where our fears didn't line up and where they mirrored each other too closely. But there was honesty between us, real honesty, the kind that doesn't demand performance. One night, months after that first party, we sat on the floor of his living room, backs against the couch, rain tapping softly against the windows. He asked me if I missed who I used to be. I thought about it. Really thought. I miss how safe it felt, I said finally. But I don't miss how small. He nodded, like that answer made sense. That was the difference now. I wasn't chasing some ideal version of myself. I was choosing the one that felt aligned, even when it was uncomfortable. The role I'd played my whole life didn't disappear. It loosened. It softened. It stopped being the only option. I learned that I could be a good son without being silent, kind without being invisible, steady without being numb. I learned that pressure doesn't always mean danger sometimes. It's just the body adjusting to a new shape. Late one night, lying beside Nathan, listening to his breathing slow as sleep took him, I placed a hand on my chest out of habit. It rose and fell easily. No weight pressing inward. No performance required. Just me, here, alive inside my own life. I'd spent years playing the right role because it kept me safe. But safety, I realized, isn't the same as living. And finally, quietly, imperfectly, I had chosen to live.